Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Alter Your Health podcast live, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. And I'm Dr. Benjamin Alter, your host.
I'm Dr. Susanna Alter, your co-host. I forgot my name for a second there.
And we are both naturopathic doctors coming to you live in our Facebook group, Plant-Based and Stress-Free. Also on Instagram at Alter Health. Thanks for joining us live, those of you who are out there. And for those of you who are tuning into the replay, and if it's your first time stopping into the podcast, welcome. We're so happy that you are here. We like to bring information that spans all from holistic nutrition and plant-based nutrition, whole food plant-based nutrition, to mind-body medicine, understanding the impact of our mindset, our emotions, our mental health on our physical body and our experience of healing in the physical body. So those are just a few of the things that we love to cover on this Alter Your Health podcast and in our clinical practice as naturopathic doctors. And today we are excited to jump into, I guess, kind of a deep dive into this topic of anger and resentment. And these were Susanna's. Susanna brought this up as you brought this up as a topic for today. And when I saw this as your proposed topic, I was thinking, like, wow, these are kind of deep topics and really important, because I think that all humans are familiar with the feelings, absolutely, of anger and resentment. And I don't think we often really voice it and express it and air it out and really get eyes and ears on this sort of topic. So that's really what our intention is here, and really hoping to support you in gaining insight and maybe shifting your thoughts and relationships with these feelings that you might have yourself as they relate to your body and your body's ability to heal.
Right, exactly. I think the last few episodes of this podcast, we've been talking more about the physical level of things, health related, and it can be so fun and exciting to talk about the physical level. It's very interesting. We can get very nitty-gritty about it.
We like to geek out on the science.
We do. But I really felt like it was time to dive deep, because for our listeners who are out there on their healing journey trying to reverse physical chronic diseases, it's so crucial that we look at this level, that we understand where the anger and resentment is coming from.
Yeah, the way I see it, and whenever we open up this conversation on holistic health and mind-body medicine, if we don't consider our feelings, if we don't consider our emotional health, and if we don't consider the impact and connection that our emotional state has on our physical health and well-being, when someone seeks our physical support and we don't look in that direction, then it really is negligence on our part. We want to support you in having as broad of an understanding of your health and well-being as possible, because let's face it, we all have kind of our blind spots when it comes to our health and where we could receive and benefit from receiving more support and love and encouragement and guidance. So maybe, I know I probably have some blind spots on the topic of anger and resentment. And I think that it's healthy, maybe just first, I know you've got some thoughts and plans, and you're kind of in the driver's seat, even though I've been talking more already. But
well, then hand it over.
But I think it might be good to I'll hand it over.
Okay, great. Well, first, I really wanted to address what I see as being one of the most important things to understand when it comes to anger and resentment. I think usually when we bring up the topic, people are like, yeah, help me get rid of it. I don't like it. I don't like how it feels. I don't like how it's controlling my behavior or my actions in life. And I actually don't want to start there. I want to start by addressing the truth that you're human and it's okay to feel anger. It's okay to feel resentment. We are human, and when we judge ourselves for our feelings, that only creates more stress in the body and in our emotional realm as well. And so, one of the keys of becoming free of resentment and anger is first allowing it to be there and accepting it, acknowledging it, and not judging yourself for having it.
Well, do you think it really is possible to be free of anger and resentment and also be a human being on planet Earth?
Good point. Good point.
Like, that in and of itself seems like maybe having the goal of complete freedom from these very human, ordinary emotions might be a little far-fetched in and of itself.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's a big insight that you've had. And yeah, it's true. It's true. The more that we embrace our humanness, the more that we embrace that we will have times in the future when we feel angry or feel resentment. Then, we take ourselves off this big hook of, this expectation that we need to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
And when we expect ourselves to be perfect, when we strive for a life that is completely free of anger and resentment, yeah, we tend to set ourselves up for some amount of disappointment.
Totally. And there's just another really interesting part of being human that it's so much easier. It tends to be so much easier to let other people off the hook in our lives than it is to let ourselves off the hook. And I remember first kind of looking in this direction of self-forgiveness and thinking like, oh yeah, like self-forgiveness, that's easy. I can do that. I I know I get that. I can do that. But then like yeah, I can forgive myself, but then I'm so quick to judge myself again the next moment or the next hour or the next day for something maybe very similar or something completely unrelated. So the self forgiveness is like maybe difficult, maybe easy, maybe it is what it is, but the perpetual self judgment and self criticism is probably like it's like a never ending stream potentially. Maybe that's just my experience, like bringing insight and awareness to this tendency to just be hard and whole, I'm speaking for myself, to just being hard and critical of myself. Just that natural awareness allows me to, it like softens the edges of the self-criticism, and then things flow and dissolve and disintegrate, and then I'm spending more time in peace.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's a big part of understanding really who we are and what anger, what resentment is. And what I hear you saying, Ben, is that, if you are to really judge yourself for feeling that anger, then that anger tends to stick around longer because then you're angry at yourself for feeling angry, right?
Yeah. I guess. But
Well,
yeah,
I
what else did you want to uncover and get into in this conversation?
Yes, yes, because now that we've started with that important truth, um, I acknowledge that there's still probably a lot of you out there listening who would still like to experience a lesser degree of anger and resentment in your life, or maybe you want to feel like it's not controlling your behavior and actions so much, because you see that when you act out of anger, it typically doesn't lead to a good end result. And so, in order to really kind of minimize anger's control over us, this is where it's really important to understand where anger comes from, where resentment comes from. What really is it anyway?
Totally.
Yeah.
Where does it come from? Where does anger and resentment come from?
Yeah.
It must come from, let's see, it must come from what I do wrong. It must come from, I mean, like resentfulness. Is that a word? Resentfulness?
Resentment.
Resentment
is the word.
Resentfulness.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a feeling like you've been wronged, right? It's a feeling like you've been wronged. It's similar to the feeling of being on the receiving end of injustice. And, it's very, very, it blends in with anger, resentment and anger.
I can't believe I'm still hung up on the fact that I said resentfulness.
Resentfulness. Don't worry. I forgot my name at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah.
So no worries. But yeah, it comes, I think a lot of it comes from a feeling that we've been wronged, whether it's from a person, something that a person did to us, or we perceive that person did something to us, or whether it's a situation that we feel like is not fair. Typically there's anger towards something outside of ourselves, right? When we're feeling that steaminess, that anger, we tend to blame it on something that's outside of ourselves. But the truth is, whether you perceive it as being from some person in your life or just a situation that you don't like, the only place that the anger is coming from is your thoughts.
Can you give an example of a time that you felt resentful?
Yes. Well,
is resentful a word? Is that?
Yeah, resentful is a word.
Okay, all right. So just resentfulness is not.
Oh, you guys are getting a 2-for-1 bonus. You're getting a
grammar,
a vocabulary lesson here too. But I think one example that comes straight to mind is an example where I felt very angry about something and you didn't. And this was, so recently we had to do some investigation work in our condo because we found mold growing on the ceiling of the bathroom. And so we've had to get the HOA involved, which, if any of you are in an HOA, you know the dynamics that can happen in an HOA. You just have to work together with the people that you live with. And this project has been so slow. We've had this hole in our ceiling for 3 weeks now. And I can even kind of feel myself talking about this situation and getting a little bit worked up.
Can I share my perspective, just because I think you're kind of beating around the bush already?
Well, what I wanted to say real fast is that I was so angry towards our HOA manager, and Ben, you didn't care at all.
Well, backing up a little bit in terms of this example, Susanna, we saw the mold on the ceiling and you got really, not angry, this is a different emotion that you felt.
Right. I don't think we need to get into all of
that. I think it's another really powerful example of the human experience and the power of thought.
Okay.
We can call it anger. You were angry that there was mold on the ceiling.
No, I was worried that there was mold on the ceiling.
You can call it whatever you want. And then I was like, oh yeah, there's just little mold on the ceiling. Like, whatever. Like, we'll figure it out. We'll get to the bottom of it. But inside of you, you had this experience or this feeling of worry, of like panic, of whatever you want to call it, or however it felt to you. And a lot of people would say, oh, I'm worried because of the mold on the ceiling. And if the mold on the ceiling was actually causing the worry or the fear, the panic or the anger, then I would be worried and fearful and angry and panicked as well. If the mold had that power over us, then anyone who saw mold on a ceiling would have that same experience. But that's, just seems ridiculous to consider that something mold on the ceiling or a hole in the ceiling or the HOA being slow, like that doesn't have the power. Nothing has the power to influence our inner experience other than our interpretation, our thoughts, our perception of that experience. And then we are living in a world continuously where we're kind of under this delusion that our internal physical experience in any moment is coming from our outside circumstances.
Right.
But that's never the case. There's a missing link to
Right.
that equation.
Right. So when I was feeling anxious about seeing the molds, the anxiousness, the sensation I had in my body, it was coming from thoughts, anxious thoughts. When I felt angry towards our HOA manager, it was from angry thoughts. It was not actually, my HOA manager does not have the power, the control
He's
over
the
me.
nicest guy.
He's the nicest guy.
It's
Let's be
funny to think.
real.
It's funny to think about that. Yeah.
I know. So, it's that's what we're talking about, is that our emotional state, our feelings come from thoughts. What are you giggling at?
I'm giggling at this comment. Dr. B drank his tea today. I'm wondering how you can tell. But yeah, so you just said our emotion comes from our thought.
It does. In every example.
Which we, whenever we uncover and dive into this topic and share these teachings of the three principles, it all comes down to the same basic truth, that our emotions or our physical human experience or our experience in our body or symptoms come from our thoughts. And I think conceptually everyone can wrap their heads around that possibility. And there probably is still a long list of things that are exceptions to that rule. Or and maybe, I think resentment is a really good topic of this podcast, because I think that resentment tends to be one of those real sticky emotional circumstances that people have a hard time considering that it's actually an inside experience. Because when we resent things, we resent our spouse for, I don't know, coming home late, cheating on us, whatever it is, like that can be a heavy, long-term emotional experience that really feels like or seems like it's coming from another person or something outside of ourselves. So it's just interesting and hopefully insightful to consider. Anyone listening to this, maybe you've had a powerful experience or a powerful feeling of holding on to that weight of resentment and really judging another person for doing something wrong. And we're not saying that that person didn't do something wrong, but we're saying the internal experience that you live with and the consequences of that emotional experience that you inflict upon yourself is completely self-induced, and self-induced based on the continual, perpetual thoughts and judgments that we hold on someone else or on ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's not, and I think this is where things get a little bit, we need to tweeze things apart a little bit. We're not saying that what someone does to you is totally okay and you need to be complacent and just be someone's doormat to walk all over you whenever they want, do whatever they want to you whenever they want. We're certainly not suggesting that. We're suggesting that you just have an understanding of where the moment to moment experience comes from. So if someone walks all over you and that doesn't feel good, then that doesn't feel good in that moment. And that is a momentary feeling, a momentary emotion, a natural human experience. But we don't need to suffer the consequence of that momentary human experience longer than it happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And, if we just consider how these feelings of resentment and anger can really influence how we act in our life, if we go back to the example of the hole in the ceiling and the HOA, I remember that night I was feeling so angry, and I was talking to you about this, and I was like, Ben, you need to call them. You need to call him. And you're like, well, he's in Europe right now. And I'm like, fine, I'm gonna send him an email and show him my thoughts.
Yeah.
But I was really caught up in the moment, in the anger. And I stopped myself. I said, okay, you know what, Susanna, just don't do anything right now. Don't act right now. Let's just see how you feel in a little bit. And I went to bed, I woke up, and I could see things from a more clear perspective. I could see that, okay, yeah, I can see how this is actually not that big of a deal. And I can respond to the situation from, this balanced place with that's inside of myself at all times. And so you, in whatever situation you're in where you feel this anger and resentment towards someone, it's like, yeah, I'd say, we don't like to give straight up advice or suggestions on these podcasts, but the truth is that you are always connected with an infinite source of wisdom that knows exactly how to respond to any given situation that's handed to you in life. So if you just step away from the anger, or even just, resist the temptation to act from that place of anger in that moment and give yourself a little bit of a timeout, what will happen naturally is that you will come back to equilibrium within yourself. And at that, default state of who you are is peace, is contentment, and is this, access point to all the solutions that you need. And so you can take a step back, and everything you need to know to respond to that situation that caused you so much anger will come, and you can respond in a way that is not going to do harm to someone else, do harm to yourself, or set yourself up for something that's going to be hard to deal with in the future.
Yeah, and as you were saying that, Susanna, I was thinking about, yeah, that's kind of maybe the ideal, like the human ideal of dealing with difficult circumstances. Taking that pause, being mindful of how we respond, how we react, have some awareness or insight as to where we're acting from and where our emotional experience is coming from. That's the ideal. But let's face it, we are, as human beings, we're reactive. We are built to react in a reflexive way to what happens to us. And sometimes we don't have that self-control, if you want to call it, willpower, or just ability to have that level of pure mindfulness in the moment. And sometimes we do stupid stuff. We act in ridiculous ways, and we just are human.
Yeah.
And the other topic that you presented as a possibility to discuss on today's podcast episode was the messiness of being human.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's hard to have this conversation or any other conversation about kind of these principles of mind and consciousness and thought. It's hard to have these kind of conversations without really pointing to and embracing the messiness that is the human experience.
Right.
And I think even though, once again, even though we know that, there's ups and downs, and there's high moods and there's low moods, and there's wins and there's struggles, even though we know that, and even though we have some conceptual understanding of this kind of hero's journey or whatever you want to call it, uh, we forget, and then we get delusioned, and maybe this is, once again, maybe this is just me, but I think that humans tend to be a little bit perfectionistic and hold themselves to higher standards than they hold other people in the world. And then as a natural kind of byproduct of that, self-criticize and self-judge and have these self-sabotaging thoughts and beliefs that then kind of influence and color the rest of our human experience. So it's also just a matter of totally embracing, like, unconditionally, that messiness, and like almost expecting the messiness, and letting, have some, like, balancing that ideal way of being and being mindful, balancing that with just a real rational,
Not
not,
rational, but
not
just
yeah, that's not the right,
that's not the right word.
realistic.
Not even
Realistic.
realistic, but
Okay.
just balancing that with um balancing that with understanding, with
Yeah.
understanding,
Yeah. With,
right?
yeah, a realistic, like, momentary understanding of who you are, where you are, what's
Yeah,
going on.
the clarity of who you
Yeah.
are. And yeah, totally, Ben. And what I find is that, of course, when we start to embrace our messiness and accept our messiness, then we can accept when other people slip up too. We can
Oh, yeah.
accept when other people are expressing their messiness. And
Yeah.
this also helps to minimize the feelings of anger in our lives, because when we can feel real compassion for someone who is suffering, let's say that person over there is in a crazy angry thought storm and is yelling and swearing and, all this stuff. It's like, yeah, we could look at that person and say, oh my gosh, what a horrible person. I'm so angry at people who act like that. Or, we could see someone who is just like us, innately well inside, but dealing with some thoughts that are really causing them to suffer.
I wanted to kind of maybe wrap things up with a thought that I had. I think I saw a Facebook post was something along the lines of, be kind even to people who aren't kind. And it was, it was something like that. And just like what you were talking, just like what you brought up just now, that's what made me think of this. It's like understanding that really every single human being is kind. Like, at the core of each and every one of us is kindness. And even though so many people, we look out in the world and we see a lot of violence, and we see a lot of anger and a lot of resentment and a lot of not kindness, everyone is still kind at their core. And that's just kind of a truth. And even the people that we see who make us really question that truth, they are also kind. So the people who are acting in unkind ways, and the people who do, in various moment to moment, obviously, that their actions and how they act and how they speak and what they do is completely dependent on their state of mind. So people who have a tendency to be unkind have a tendency to be in stressful thinking. And those people who are living in stressful thinking and expressing themselves in unkind ways from their stressful thinking, they deserve kindness, maybe even more so than the rest of us. So it's like everyone deserves kindness, but it's just a reminder that when we see violence or when we see people doing really ridiculous, stupid, harmful, awful things, that's where we can show up and share our kindness, share our love, share our compassion with those people who really truly do need it most. And I think that, once again, I think that it's maybe easier said than done, and easier to conceptually understand this than actually practice and live into that. But I think that's the real opportunity here, is to, on this topic of anger and resentment, just given the kindness to those places that we perceive as deficient in kindness. Just, yeah.
Yeah, if that's to someone else or to yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what last thoughts, Dr. Susanna? Oh my gosh, 31 minutes in.
Well, let's wrap things up. And, what we didn't talk about today was just what effect long-term anger and resentment has on our physical health. And if you're curious to learn more about that, we do have a podcast episode. I think it's called something like the stress, how stress worsens your symptoms. And
that's one of them for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we have talked about the mind-body connection in so many of our other episodes. So, so we didn't talk about it in this episode.
But maybe it's worth emphasizing here, like you're doing, that anger is maybe one of the, we'll call it like toxic things for the body.
Yeah.
And that's not to fear anger or to run away from anger. It's to embrace anger and understand anger and then let it go. And then allow the peace that is your natural default state to crowd out the anger that really doesn't have any power over you beyond what you think or what you give it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also just want to say I love what Barbara said here in the comments, that everyone was born with love.
Yeah,
love
thanks,
that.
Barbara, for
Yes.
the reminder. And thank you for tuning in to this episode on the Alter Your Health podcast. Once again, if you'd like to join the live conversation, come on into the plant-based and stress-free Facebook group. That's the best place to join in, and you can find us at www.facebook.com/groups/alterhealth.
And if you would like to have a deeper conversation about how all of this that we talked about in this episode applies to you and your health, or simply just a conversation about how to optimize your health and reverse disease most optimally, you can schedule a complimentary 15-minute consultation with myself or Dr. Benjamin so we can figure out how we can best support you.
That's our mission.
All right.
All right. Peace and love, you guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.